This is the first podcast of the new year and episode 7 of the Phantom Punch podcast. I'm here with Kick from Movement Marshals, and we will be talking about a really good fight on the UFC 324 card. First off, how are we doing, Kick?
Doing great, man. How are you? Happy New Year. Happy
Yeah,
2026.
Happy New Year. You want to start us off with your reads on John Silva?
Had a lot of fun watching. I was watching stuff from Allen and Silva, obviously, and the context in which this fight will be talked about, especially when we get to like the matchup and whatnot, I think is going to boil down a lot to the open stance matchup, because John Silva has faced quite a few southpaws in his career, and he has a couple nice weapons for dealing with southpaws, and I'm sure you'll get into it when we talk about Arnold Allen. But Arnold Allen himself, in terms of his weapons, is like a meat and potatoes sort of southpaw. Would you kind of agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And so I think it's going to be really interesting, just because Silva has a couple things he likes to do against southpaws. The interesting thing about John Silva, and this also, when we're looking at the matchup, it comes down to I think their demeanors are very much expressed in their fighting styles. John Silva's kind of a crazy, interesting, passionate guy, especially when it comes to fighting. He's always dapping up his opponent. He's always making love to Bruce Buffer in the middle of the octagon before they do their thing. He cries after his fights. He's a very, very passionate man. And though I wouldn't call this a one-to-one correlation, that passion expresses itself in like a very instinctual sort of fighting style. The fighting nerds are definitely good game planners. They're definitely an interesting team in some ways, or they can be good game planners is what I'll say. But John Silva seems to rely on being a reactive fighter. He's very reactive to what the opponent is doing. He's focusing on what the opponent is doing. The weird part about him is that in MMA, you have a lot of guys around that mid-range sort of level who occupy this space as an okay meat and potatoes sort of fighter, and they don't really throw in combination. They kind of pot shot. They try and pressure in moments, but maybe they stay on the back foot when they're met with offense. And Silva exhibits a couple of these things, except it's actually really entertaining. And that's because, one, he's a very mechanically efficient striker. Two, he's got an incredible eye for an opening. And like I said, in being reactive, he knows what his opponent is doing, and he knows what weapon to actually counter his opponent with in a moment, in more of a tactical sense than a strategic sense. And he's just a very mechanically efficient striker. He throws a lot of power into his shots. It has some elements of what you see that you don't like about watching mid-tier MMA. And this isn't me calling him a mid-tier MMA fighter. It's just some of those elements and habits, but exhibited in a way that's very entertaining, and he becomes a very salient fighter.
I definitely agree with what you're saying with his style manifesting with his personality, because like you said, he's very passionate. And you can see that he's always dapping up his opponent. But what is weird, he's also very reactive. You would think somebody who's that passionate would be more of a pressure fighter. He's more of a sit back and throw his left hook as hard as possible when the guy comes in.
He has great reads when his opponent comes in. And this is the other part where he exhibits some habits that are by the book things you don't like to see, where he loves operating in straight lines, both offensively and defensively. Perhaps that's also been aided by, say, the Drew Dober fight. He was fighting against a southpaw who loves coming in on a straight line and not moving his head a lot. And Drew Dober became this perfect canvas to paint his masterpiece on. And I'm stealing that. I've heard that many times, especially from Kyle McLaughlin and Combat Chronicles, and he was talking on a podcast about Peter Yan with Haxorized and Dan Alberts. They said that a couple times, so that's in my head. Just wanted to give homage there. But Dober became the perfect canvas for him to paint a masterpiece on, because he has some great open stance weapons. It does really well on countering an opponent who's coming in straight. And so, like you said, when we're looking at his fighting style a bit more granularly, he does hang out on the back foot. He's not really pressuring. He'll jump in on a moment. You'll see he has this super wide stance that allows him to hop back and hop back into range. Not dissimilar to someone like Conor McGregor in terms of why they have that wide stance. I would say he's a lot less bouncy. He's more rooted in his stance. He's not really bouncing all that much. He's more just stepping. Every now and then he'll take a nice wide lateral step. If he does happen to have his opponent pressed up against the cage, you saw that against Charles Jourdain. He actually did have moments of pressure there, but largely he's hanging out on the back foot. When the opponent starts to come in, he'll jump back and he'll get a little more square in his stance, and he'll throw some counter strikes. Like you said, most of the time, it's a mechanically nice left hook, but most of his punches, he's also overthrowing just a bit, and he needs to return to stance. In the open stance matchup, he uses the left hook in the way one would use a cross counter in the close stance matchup, whereas an opponent's trying to pressure him and they'll jab or they will double jab, he'll come right over with a left hook to get them there. And he'll usually land it nice and clean. He landed a million times on Dober. Definitely landed it on Lopez a couple times, who likes to just kind of shoot his jab out there. Lopez's fight is a little less prescient when we're looking at this fight, but still there were some interesting things there and very entertaining fight nonetheless. But he loves that left hook. Sometimes he'll hop back on a slight angle, which is nice, like to the open side, and throw his right straight, which is something you saw McGregor do all the time. But generally he's operating on, I'm jumping back and I'm trying to counter.
He doesn't really hand fight when he's in an open stance matchup. He almost always keeps his lead hand close to him. So when he does jump back, he can blast people with that left hook. And it's hard for his opponents to get a read on him when he doesn't hand fight.
That's a great point. And I feel like when I was watching his fights, I was expecting him to hand fight more, because every now and then he'll bring both hands out as just like a little thing. And this is what I mean. He's not really a process-oriented fighter. He has a couple things he likes, like the left hook, but generally he's kind of just doing things. It's kind of hard to get an exact read on him as an analyst, and I'm sure as a fighter too, because he's very much an entertaining counter fighter, if you know what I mean.
Which is weird, because it seems like when he's fighting open stance, they want to charge at him, which makes his style entertaining.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And he's gotten spectacular finishes. And I mean, that's the other thing, is that when you're just describing his style, it sounds like a fighter who wouldn't be all that entertaining. But then you watch him, and because he's really accurate, because he has a good eye for timing, because he knows what weapons to use in certain situations, times knees and uppercuts as an opponent ducks in for a takedown, or they're just ducking away from his strikes really well. He nails people with uppercuts and knees. He has a really good eye for that. His intangible aspects in terms of his eye and the fact that he just throws really hard makes him really fun to watch, even though when you just describe his style, well, that kind of just sounds like a boring capital T technical counter fighter.
Similar to Leon Edwards.
Yes.
He doesn't have the process. He just does things. He doesn't build off of threats. He's mainly punishing the opponent's entries.
Yeah, exactly. He has this big, wide stance, and then you think, oh, that leaves him open for leg kicks. It definitely does. He kind of gets nailed in the legs and body with leg kicks and body kicks quite a lot. He doesn't really have an answer for that. And he's flashy. He loves doing flashy stuff. He'll come in just waving his hands at his opponents, ducking down as like a pseudo fainting game. It blends in with his whole demeanor and style. But he'll do that flashy physique lean back. And then what's nice is he'll come right back in with some punches, and he'll usually catch people there. He'll throw the odd high kick himself. Again, he's not really ever using anything as a hurting strike. He really does tend to just operate on these straight lines with slight angle changes. And he's never really trying to pressure the opponent. He'll just throw in an odd, really nice, really hard body kick, the odd really nice high kick. I remember one instance, he threw a high kick, and I love when you throw the rear high kick and then throw the right straight off of it. It's not super powerful because you're not planted in your stance, but it usually hits people real nice and clean. So I love seeing stuff like that. He has a lot of cool moments because he is flashy, and he, like I said, he has good eye for an opening, all that. He has really cool moments. He's not really a process-oriented fighter. And then when you look at something like the Lopez fight, you did see him start just pressuring more and getting into a firefight. And that was with another orthodox opponent. Lopez was also taking all of his best shots. And then you see when he gets overzealous, which he did in that second round, even in the first round when he gave away his back to give Lopez the takedown, when he gets overzealous, he just kind of comes in rushing. He doesn't really have a process for pressuring an opponent. He really is hanging out on the back foot and finding really cool counter strikes. But because of his stance and because of how he likes to avoid high kicks, and this can get a little bit more into the matchup, his leg and his body are wide open for those sorts of kicks.
So you mentioned his bladed stance. This also relates to Arnold Allen, but we'll get to that later. Like you said, he is vulnerable to leg kicks and body kicks because he's on a line most of the time. What's interesting about the Lopez fight is 2 minutes in, if I remember correctly, he actually starts to get a good read on Lopez's very heavy lead foot, and he
Yeah.
starts throwing front kicks, but he never really builds off of it. I found something. Let me just spam it.
Yeah, exactly. Those front kicks in the Lopez fight were full power, leaning back, like getting that full extension on his leg. It was like a full, he throws strikes as you would throw them hitting the mitts in class, basically. He's putting everything into them. He has a jab that is part of his 1-2. Like you said, he doesn't hand fight, but every now and then he'll just kind of do the thing that you always do in the open stance matchup where you just kind of jab their lead hand and you meet each other's lead hands. You know what I mean? Just what you see in those dead spaces of the fight. He'll kind of just do that for a little bit sometimes, but he doesn't ever really use the jab as a setup tool. He doesn't use it to goad people into actually charging into range. He really is more of a wait and see counter in the moment. And it's in those moments where he finds success. Perhaps the best success he finds is, you see this in the Jourdain fight and you see this in the Dober fight, in moments that he's framing for a moment. That's how he got this beautiful uppercut against Jourdain, and how he got, I believe, the spinning elbow, the first spinning elbow on Dober that really spelled the end for the fight at the end of the second round. It's in this moment where he's framing off of them for a second, and then he'll throw something cool, and then he finds these huge shots where he'll pause for a second, and it gives the opponent a second to be, okay, we're just in this interstitial position right now, and then he'll throw something huge and catch him off guard. It's very instinctual. It's very much, let's see what I have here and work with it and find one big shot. You see this in the Dober and in the Lopez fight especially. He has cool spinning back elbows, and he uses like up elbows pretty well when an opponent's coming in or kind of to enter range himself. I do like his elbow game. It doesn't really go anywhere except for those moments in the Lopez fight where he threw probably every sort of elbow you could throw, right? In that sequence before he got finished. He threw every sort of elbow which you could throw, which was awesome. You don't see a sequence like that in MMA usually. That's why it's hard to have a read on what he's going to do, because it is all based on what the opponent does. And sometimes he just kind of finds something cool that you might not be expecting.
His ability to find shots in the interstitial areas or the gray areas of the fight where there's not really a positional advantage. One of the things that I think he has a really good eye for, he's able to punish people when I wouldn't say it's 50-50. It's more of who's recovering faster, those types of positions.
And when they're not expecting to be punished, possibly.
In that Dober fight, he was framing off of him. Was it after a clinch?
I think it was after a clinch or after Dober. This is as he was trying to take him down. That was a fight he had in the Mitchell fight, he had the really nice down blocks. So it was as he was trying to take him down, I believe, where he has that down block and then ninja choke and he pulled him up. He had his back to the cage. He puts himself with his back to the cage a lot, but then in these weird little clinch moments, he's actually more dangerous than most people.
I remember in the Charles Jourdain fight, he was actually fighting off of a single. He has the knee shield with the whizzer, and then as soon as he limp legs out, he throws an uppercut. Those are the types of situations that he excels at.
Exactly. He had like a frame off the face when he threw that uppercut.
Yeah, it's almost like he's very alert in those gray area, not the dead spaces of the fight. It's the gray area in between transitions.
The transitional phases, interstitial phases, whatever you want to call it. There's probably a million and one things you could call it.
I'll go with Arnold Allen now. So southpaw with a very active lead hand and good step-up kicks. To bring it back to what you said, it's a fight of different styles based on personality. So Arnold Allen, he's more of a laid-back dude, but the weird part is he likes to lead a lot with his jab, and he likes to change levels a lot. He has a very good hurting weapon in his rear straight. He gets a lot of stank on his step-up low kicks, and my favorite step-up kick of his is when he goes to the body with it when the opponent exits an exchange. It's a weird look because he slots it in randomly sometimes. Allen likes to bounce in and out with a bladed stance. He has a bladed stance like John Silva, but the thing that's different is he likes to bounce in and out with it. This lets him hide his step-up kicks and his jab. What's interesting about his jab is he doesn't just jab out of one position. He jabs out of both a low hand stance, so where his lead hand is dangling, and from a high guard position where he has his lead hand high. His rear straight is a good single shot weapon at range, even though he's bladed most of the time. And we can talk about this later, but because he's bladed, when he does get greedy and wants to exchange in the pocket, he tends to overextend and fall out of position.
That was one of the main things, is that you watch moments of the Holloway fight and the Hooker fight, is he has this really nice 1-2, and then when he feels he's hurt him, stands straight up and starts swinging these hooks and over swinging on them, and he got caught by Hooker, he got caught by Holloway. But it's a funny dichotomy while watching him have like a pretty salient, stance in game. And then when he smells blood or he feels like he wants to go for it, he kind of stands straight up and starts winging these hooks.
Yeah, it's super weird because he's actually really clean when he's playing at range, but when he starts to get really greedy, he starts to overswing and get himself out of position. I noticed as the fight progresses, he gets really heavy on his lead leg, similar to how Lopez starts the fight against Silva. When he does that, he starts to resort to leaning back as a defense, and as we know, that's not really ideal against somebody like Silva who can punish exits. His main defense when he's sharp is distance, so he backs up a lot. He'll point his elbow towards his opponent when he does back up. Like in the Max Holloway fight, a lot of it was him backing up and then using a high guard, or him backing up and pointing his elbow towards Holloway, almost like a shoulder roll, but he's not really rolling. He's not staying in the pocket long enough to counter. He leaves the pocket and exchanges with his elbow pointed towards the opponent, which kind of a neat look, but it doesn't really allow him to counter or attack the opponent when the opponent's out of position. And in extended pocket exchanges, he starts to dip to his power side. Like you notice this a lot in the Sadiq Youssef fight, but the way he mitigates the threat of the high kick is by moving in and jamming the kicks.
I think that's a great read too. Just a little thing that I noticed in terms of like moving into range. It seems like he stole this from Max Holloway when he fought him. You saw this in the Chikadze fight, that floating teep that Oliveira and Holloway both used to kind of step right into outside foot position, punch off of that, which was nice to see in terms of entering range a little bit more saliently. And like you said, jamming the kicks, as a lot of them were, especially in that Chikadze fight, because the first 2 rounds he was getting kicked a lot, but also staying safe most of the time.
The floating teep that you mentioned actually pairs well with his step-up kicks because it's the same motion. He's showing the rear teep or the lead teep as he enters range, so he doesn't get blasted by low kicks. I actually like what he does when he overextends and the opponent stays in the pocket with him. When he throws his right hand, he's able to convert it into a collar tie or just push off. Since he does have the range advantage here, he should do that more.
I definitely think so.
Also level change with his jab, so he'll show the jab high and then jab the body, which is a nice look. He was really effective with that in the Movsar fight because Movsar was operating out of a very square stance, and Movsar is a very plodding fighter who stands tall a lot. So the jab was working beautifully for Allen in that fight. Later in that fight, when Movsar would shoot in for a low single, he'd convert the jab into a frame. I'm not really seeing that in this fight. What do you think?
I don't know if I'd exactly see that. The thing that I like for Allen, he's much more process oriented. He knows what he wants to do, except when he gets real excited and quote unquote sees red. And he actually is a pretty salient pressure fighter. He uses nice wide lateral steps to cut the opponent off. He, like you said, with his step-up kicks, he also uses that step-up high kick when the opponent's circling to his lead side, which is a nice hurting strike. He actually does use, you mentioned the same thing with his left straight as a hurting strike. He's good at hurting the opponent, cutting off their exits, kind of bringing them to the cage. And Silva's kind of go there naturally, and that's where a lot of that, I think, with a dynamic and who's going to have the upper hand is going to play out, and where we're going to see who might be coming out on top in that.
Silva likes to take the inside angle, and something I noticed about Allen, which isn't really a good weapon for him, is his rear kick. It looks really wooden, and it's not as mechanically great as his jab, his 1-2, and his step-up kicks, it's something that he struggles with because the step-up kicks and the right hand, those have really good mechanics when you look at him, but when you look at his rear high kick or rear inside low kick, it doesn't look as efficient.
It definitely doesn't look as efficient. He does have a bit more of a in-ish composure, especially with those rear kicks. That's also like this dichotomy with this fight where Silva is like, I suppose in like the Jack Dempsey sense, a lot of his punches when he kind of hops back and squares up, and a lot of his strikes tend to be a lot more pure in terms of like output. He's over swinging a lot more just in terms of his natural fighting style, less pronounced than when Allen gets excited in moments. But Allen has this dichotomy with himself where he's usually pretty clean on the outside and then he'll get excited. But Silva himself is very mechanically pure when striking, but he is overswinging and leaving himself open in those spots.
For the people listening, when we say mechanically pure, that just means that he's getting his weight behind his punches. He's doing a good job transitioning his weight to either foot.
Exactly. You'll even see he'll have these big, flashy returns to stance with his arm, and he'll throw his right hand, especially his right hand to the body, like a Tommy Hearns chopping right, which is kind of funny. He doesn't even change levels with it. He just like chops down with it and then has to swing his arm back in return to stance. It's all very dramatic.
Against Cater, he was moving back into his left and timing Cater's step in and countering the step with his rear hand, and that was a really good look for him. I don't think that's going to happen here because Silva is a lot more reactive and he's not really one to press the action unless he gets hurt.
The only time you really saw him press was, I mean, at least in his recent run in that second round of the Lopez fight, when he really just started coming on, and that's also how he got finished.
When he charges in, that's when things get very sketchy for Allen, just because when he gets out of stance, it's not good because Holloway exploited this just by going into a closed stance with him. By keeping the stance closed, he was able to pivot towards his open side where I don't know if this was a game plan thing or something that he read in the fight, but because he pivots out to his open stance, Holloway knows that Arnold Allen doesn't have a good rear kick, so he was pretty much able to pivot there for free. When you look at the exchanges in that Holloway-Allen fight, he would overextend himself, and then a really concerning thing is when he does overextend himself, his head would go over his lead leg after Max pivots away, so he's completely out of position, and then he's got to cut the cage again, which he had a hard time against Max Holloway.
Cutting the cage against Holloway is going to be a lot more difficult than Chikadze, who by the third round he's able to cut the cage against, and that's also because he got tired.
He's usually using the jab to get people backing up, and then he's trying to force exchanges that way. Which, again, we talked about process. That's a lot more process than Silva.
Silva has consistent weapons he uses in moments, but Allen has specific weapons he's using in certain ranges and for different purposes.
Really think the fact that he doesn't have a good rear kick is what hurt him against Holloway. Holloway would come in and jab, and then he would just try to cross-counter him, where instead if he did have a rear kick or a rear calf kick, he would have been able to jam Holloway's entry by using that calf kick as Holloway steps in. I think that's going to be a big factor here because Silva likes to circle towards the rear side. And when he throws his left hook, he does dip waist level sometimes.
Yep.
And that's a good opportunity for Allen to throw his rear kick. When you see his rear kick, like against Sadiq Youssef, it's not great.
That's the interesting part is in those pocket moments when he could punish something, yeah, his rear kicks aren't going to probably be doing a lot. I think in open space and in like the dead spaces, I think his step-up calf kick could do a lot of good work for not even just hurting Silva, but hurting his calf, but also just taking him out of his super wide stance and just making him uncomfortable. I think using that as a real consistent weapon would be a really good idea for him. That part's going to work better than his rear kicks.
Let's talk about how they match up. We think that Allen's going to be the guy pressing forward. Silva's going to be the one on the back foot. How do you think Allen should cut Silva off?
Good question, because Silva's naturally going to back himself up to the cage to an extent. Once he finds himself there, he'll like to hit a shot and then circle off. Silva's going to be against the cage wanting to counter, and Allen's going to be coming in. Is going to be interesting because we know Allen, the majority of the time, is going to want to be landing his rear straight. Given that Silva hops back and also even sometimes lean backs when there's that kick threat and maybe there's a feinting opportunity there for Allen, those could be good times to kind of extend his straight, and where overextending for him might help it just in terms of reaching him, considering he just stands so far back and his stance is so wide, so it might be hard to reach his actual head. I think that he can definitely catch him in moments there, but also those moments where he overextends is also kind of prime for Silva to land some of his super nice counter shots. And in the same vein, it might be a good idea to just sometimes throw that rear straight to the body. Silva's doesn't really move, even more so than most people, and the body generally doesn't really move. Using that as an attritive weapon early could help stifle him a little bit, make him a little more frustrated, goad him into coming in. He wasn't able to cut off Max Holloway, but he does show the ability to use his step-up kicks to the right side or to the opponent's left side and his left straight as hurting weapons to kind of cut off those exits. He does love circling out to that power side after he's kind of hit a nice counter shot along the cage. Allen himself, I don't necessarily see the head movement or sometimes that defensive reliability within the pocket to ward off all of what Silva's going to be throwing at him.
I think the idea of the rear straight for Allen is a double-edged sword because in the Drew Dober fight, Dober was hitting Silva with that consistently. Then the moment that he gets a read on it, Silva's throwing a spinning back elbow or using a knee to intercept the rear straight. He does get a good sense of timing on the opponent's level change. For Allen, he's going to need to be careful on his entries. Sometimes don't even attack, just stay in his face. Silva really relies on overcommitments and charges, but if you just stay in his face and almost do nothing, he'll keep backing up. That's a win for Allen. Keep up that pressure. Sometimes land the rear straight to the body, but don't do anything for a couple of minutes. Make Silva uncomfortable.
Even though Allen, like you said, doesn't have these mechanically nice rear kicks, I do definitely think there's something there in open space of punishing the fact that whenever a rear kick is coming, he does like to lean back. And you could even slot in it doesn't even have to be super nice, a quick little body kick in there. He was doing it with Chikadze. He was just slotting in a couple body kicks around that were able to slow him down by the third. And like you said, they're not pretty, but they're working. I think he's more than open for that if you just keep hammering. Even if you're just hammering 4 in for the first 2 rounds, you might get some sort of reaction from him by the third.
Another interesting idea I have for this fight is that if Allen decides not to engage at all, what's that going to look like? Silva needs the guy to be coming in quickly. So if Allen decides to just sit back and poke with his jab, what is that going to look like?
It's a good question because the one time we saw him really force himself on somebody was in the Lopez fight, and that's because Lopez. The good thing is that Allen's been caught. I think he does have a good chin, and mostly he's just getting caught when he's overextending and super out of position. Lopez took his best shots, and then Lopez would come back in. And I mean, Allen's done the same exact thing. You saw it on the hooker. He got caught with a hook that snapped his head all the way around, and then he just kept coming in. When Allen's hurt, if Silva does decide to do something there, he is just going to come in on you. And Silva does like that, but maybe he comes in a way where he can overwhelm him. Or that's the tough part. It does seem like you need to do something to Silva or to frustrate him enough to get him to come in. Maybe that's where some consistent straights and kicks to the body come in to just kind of keep him on the outside. I don't know what it's going to look like if Allen plays a more conservative game to not frustrate Silva enough to make him feel like he needs to, get it back, but frustrate him in the sense that not a lot is happening. The one other thing to go off of that is I don't think that would favor Allen simply because you don't want to have a conservative game with John Silva necessarily, because when he does hit something, it is usually super impactful. It looks super nice, and it looks like it makes an impact on the opponent. So if you're playing that sort of game, Allen has this great left hand that's super powerful, but Silva just naturally being a little flashier, putting all of his weight into his shots, if you're going on this single digit significant strike sort of fight every round, that will probably lean Silva's way just for those moments that he does land something.
Yeah, like you said, very impactful moments when he does find something, but he doesn't build off of it.
Allen is going to want to be pressuring throughout simply because you need to. He is going to want to focus more on his pretty good footwork and hurting strikes, competent, I'll say, in just moments of lateral movement to keep himself safe and keep Silva off his train tracks. Because Silva does love working in these straight lines, and the angles he usually takes are slight, not usually pivoting. He's usually just hopping back, maybe on a slight angle.
That hop back causes Silva to reset a lot, and I would recommend that Allen would attack those resets with his step-up low kick.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is as he hops back, as he's resetting, just slot that in there, and he's going to get uncomfortable with that eventually.
And like Jack Slack says, Arnold Allen is one of the few guys in MMA that can get stank on his step-up low kick. If he can time that when Silva jumps in, that would be good for him to build off of and be able to frustrate Silva.
Yeah.
It'll make him at least hesitant.
Exactly. Just by the nature of how he stands, it's going to be that much more impactful when he does slot it in there. It's definitely going to take him out of his stance. It's definitely going to hurt a lot if he's not being taken out of his stance.
So since we don't do picks on this podcast, do you have any shameless plugs you'd like to tell the audience?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you can find everything that I do, all my analysis. I do post everything on Twitter at Movement Marshals, at MVMNT Marshals, but all of that leads to my more long form work on my website, movementmarshals.com, where I have a ton of articles. It's been a nice slow season. I'm still working on a bit of a 2025 article, and I'll write about other combat sports sometimes, boxing. I'm working on a sumo article too. So feel free to find any and all of my stuff there, but Twitter's definitely the best place. And also YouTube. I make pretty cool YouTube videos, and there's going to be a lot more coming this year. Movement Marshals on YouTube as well.
All right. And on my end, I am actually monetized on the first level now on YouTube.
Woohoo.
So you guys can join memberships and all that good stuff. So for the membership, it's kind of different from Substack because if you join and become a member on my YouTube channel, also get access to my full Substack, but you'll also get a bonus, which I will email you about. So sign up to my YouTube memberships and also sign up to my Substacks at phantompunchbreakdowns.substack.com. And with that, we'll see you next time.
See you later.